Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for tuning in again. Today we're going to talk about how Christianity came to Vietnam. And it's going to be a long story, so buckle up and let's jump straight to the story. Now, before we start with the history, I would like to give you guys a heads up. Just a little bit about Vietnam, in case you don't know. Vietnam sits on the eastern edge of mainland Southeast Asia, covering around 331,000 square kilometers and is home to over 100 million people. That makes it roughly the 15th most populous nation in the world and one of only two communist states in Southeast Asia. Most Vietnamese follow folk religions, including ancestral worship, with influences from Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Christianity also has a growing presence, and Vietnam is the birthplace of two unique movements, Cao Daism and Hao Haoism. Vietnam's constitution declares it a secular state and officially guarantees freedom of religion, while the government adopts strict atheist policies from 1975 to the late 1980s. Today, religious freedom is protected under Article 24, saying all religions equal before the law. Official data suggests Buddhism remains the largest religion, followed by Catholicism, Protestantism, Hao Buddhism, and Cao Daism. But many Vietnamese still practice folk and ancestral traditions, and these have actually seen a resurgence in recent years. Now let's jump into the story. History. Now, it all started back in the 10th century. It is believed that some Christian priests from the Nestorian church made their way to Vietnam, but things didn't really take off until much later. Now, fast forward to the 16th century, this is when the first Catholic missionaries arrived, mostly from Portugal and Spain. In the year 1524, a Portuguese merchant named Duarte Colho, sorry if I pronounce it incorrectly, he sailed into the port town of Hoi An, which is in central Vietnam. Now, he came to trade and he brought Catholic missionaries along with him. I think this is a very normal occurrences in Southeast Asia where so many people from Europe came to trade, but they brought along missionaries together to spread the gospel to the people, to the native, to the locals. However, in the beginning, Christianity didn't exactly explode in popularity. Early missions struggled to gain traction until the Jesuits arrived in the early 17th century. These Jesuit missionaries, mainly from Italy, Portugal, and Japan, really helped Christianity gain a foothold in Vietnam, especially in two regions, the northern area called Tonkin and the southern region known as Cochinchina. There's one example, one story. In 1615, Francesco Buzomi and Diego Carvalho founded the very first Catholic community in Hoi An. And just a bit later, between 1627 and 1630, missionaries Alexander de Rode and Pero Marquez helped convert over 6,000 people in Tonkin. And it's amazing. 6,000 people at the time, it's like, I don't know, 100,000 now. However, the Jesuits' activities weren't always welcomed by the Vietnamese governments at the time. So they were not open because the culture is just so different. In 1630, Lord Ching Chang of Tonkin expelled or kicked these missionaries out. Now, similarly, after some Japanese Christians participated in a revolt in Hoi An in 1639, Lord Nguyen Phuc Lan of Cochinchina ordered the Jesuits to leave his territory. Now, despite the challenges they faced, Jesuit missionaries like Francesco de Pina, Gaspardo Amaral, and Antonio Barbosa, and also Alexander de Rode, played a key role in the development of Chu Quoc Ngu in the early 17th century. Now, what is that? What's Chu Quoc Ngu? Chu Quoc Ngu is the new Romanized alphabet for the Vietnamese language, and it used the Latin script, but with added diacritics to match Vietnamese sounds. And the tone. And yes, by the way, it is still the official writing system in Vietnam today. But before Chu Quoc Ngu was widely used, Vietnam used a script called Chu No. This traditional script was the main way Catholic teachings were shared, especially through missionaries like Girolamo Maiorica. Now, Girolamo was an expert in Juno. Juno remained the primary writing system for the faith until the late 19th century. So it's just recently. Even though Alexander the Roth and the others who helped shape the Chukuk Mu could easily be considered founders of modern Vietnam because of how impactful the script would later become, Christianity still faced a lot of pushback. But eventually, Christians were expelled when the Trin saw Catholicism as a threat to their authority. The new script was mostly left unused outside of the Catholic Church for quite a long time until the 20th century when it finally gained national adoption. Still, the missionaries didn't give up. Their effort continued through the French missionary group called this. Sorry, I don't know. Over time, Catholicism was re-established in Vietnam and eventually it grew rapidly. By the early 19th century, there were already many thousands of Catholics in Vietnam. But the relationship between Catholicism and Vietnam's rulers, it was uneasy, to say the least. At the end of the 18th century, a French missionary named Pierre Pignot Pierre Pignot played a major role in Vietnam's political landscape. He became a close advisor to Nguyen An, and An was the last Nguyen lord. And Piña hoped that if An came out victorious in the outgoing civil war in Vietnam, it would benefit the Catholic Church. Very, very political, yes. But now historians actually debate how much Pino really influenced on success. However, we do know that he and other missionaries actively helped by supplying military equipment and even enlisting European soldiers to support on success. In August of 1798, the Tay Son dynasty was in power, and their ruler, Emperor Tai Tien, hearing Catholic support for Nguyen An, he decided to order a brutal massacre of Catholic in Quang Tri. That massacre took the lives of more than 10,000 people. Yeah, and it was during this brutal time, that a Marian apparition was reported. Our Lady of La Femme, many Catholics in Vietnam believed that she appeared to comfort and protect the faithful during their suffering. Eventually, Nguyen An did conquer Vietnam. He became Emperor Gia Long, and although he followed the Confucian principles, he tolerated Catholicism and even allowed missionary work, mainly because of respect, because these missionaries helped him out. Now, by the time Gia Long passed away, there were 6 European bishops in Vietnam and estimated 360,000 Christians. But this moment of peace didn't actually last long because Gia Long, while respectful to Christians, Gia Long was also a strong believer in Confucian traditions. So while choosing his successor, he passed over his eldest son, who had actually converted to Catholicism, and instead appointed Minh Mang, who was known for wanting to curb Catholic influence in the country. Here, a power struggle happened. It broke out basically during the reign of Emperor Minh Mang. On one side was the emperor, a strict Confucian, and on the other side, a group of pro-Catholic officials who were trying to hold on to their influence. As suspicion toward Catholics deepened, it turned into open oppression again. Churches were destroyed. Both Vietnamese and foreign Catholics who refused to renounce their faith were executed. It was very brutal. At one point, a large group of Catholic Vietnamese soldiers, they attempted to overthrow Minh Mang, and they tried to install Catholic emperor, but it failed. They failed. After that, Minh Mang imposed a strict limits on Catholicism, and over time, these led to a series of uprisings by Catholic priests during the Nguyen Dynasty. Their goal? To establish a Christian monarchy in Vietnam. So it's religious, but it's very political as well. Now, fast forward to the French colonial period from 1858 to 1883, many Vietnamese Catholics chose to side with the French. They believed colonial rule might protect them and allow their faith to thrive. And actually, it happened for a while. That's exactly what happened. Because under French patronage, the Catholic Church grew rapidly. They opened mission schools and hospitals across the country. The church even became one of the largest landowners in Vietnam. Actually, during this time, Vietnamese Catholics were favored by the colonial administration because they were given better access to education and opportunities, and many actually rose to form a Catholic elite, more privileged than their fellow Vietnamese under French law. Now, after the French defeat and Vietnam's division in the mid 1950s, Catholicism started to decline in the north, mostly due to the rise of communist rule, which saw the church as a potential threat. In 1954, an agreement allowed people to relocate between North and South Vietnam. It is believed, and according to some sources, around 650,000 Northern Catholics took that opportunity to flee south in what was called Operation Passage to Freedom. In the south, they were welcomed by President Ngo Dinh Diem, a devout Catholic himself whose brother was actually an archbishop. He strongly supported the Catholic Church. He granted it special privileges, consecrated the entire nation to the Virgin Mary, and he favored Catholics when it came to appointments to official positions. And at the same time, though, he actively suppressed Buddhism. Catholic groups were even allowed to destroy Buddhist temple or Buddhist sites, which, as you might guess, it stirred up a lot of tension in the country. By 1955, around 600,000 Catholics were still living in the north. But thank God came the reunification. After the North won the war and Vietnam was unified under communist rule in 1975, the government claimed that Catholic religious life remained stable and free from persecution. But at the same time, they were quietly working to suppress Catholics who opposed the regime. The government pushed others to join state-controlled renovation and reconciliation movements that promoted loyalty to the communist state. But still, many Catholics remained quietly resistant. When the Doi reforms came in, government's approach toward Catholics starts to shift. It became more flexible in some areas, but still cautious overall. In 1980, Vietnam's Catholic Bishops' Conference was officially established. Now, that is a big step for the Catholic Church in a socialist government. And then, in 1988, something historic happened. 117 Vietnamese Catholics, representing hundreds of thousands of martyrs who had died for their faith, were canonized by Pope John Paul II. It was a powerful recognition of the suffering and steadfast faith of Vietnamese Christians across the centuries. But what about Protestant in Vietnam? Protestant Christianity was first introduced in 1911 in Da Nang by Robert A. Jeffrey, a Canadian missionary with the Christian and Missionary Alliance. Over the years, more than 100 missionaries from this group helped spread the faith in Vietnam. Their efforts eventually led to the founding of the Evangelical Church of Indochina in 1927. When Vietnam was divided in 1954, the church also split into two branches. The Evangelical Church of Vietnam North, often called ECVN, was officially recognized by the Northern government in 1963. Meanwhile, the Southern Evangelical Church of Vietnam, SECV, wasn't officially recognized until 2001. In more recent years, according to Vietnam Discovery Travel, there has been quite a bit of unrest in areas with Protestant communities. American-based gospel organizations often release reports claiming human rights abuses and restrictions on religious freedom. Now, these reports allege that Protestant groups, especially those not registered with the government, face pressure, monitoring, and even harassment. I would like to use this opportunity as well to invite everyone who's watching this to take a moment in your prayer to mention the situation in Vietnam. And if you are from Vietnam or if you're Vietnamese, please feel free to leave a comment below and mention the prayer points that you would like us to pray. That's the end of the story of how Christ came to Vietnam. And I hope you guys can learn something from today's story. I enjoy studying history, so I kind of know it was political. At the time, there were so many missionaries who came to Southeast Asia, and then they tried to get into the government or the kingdom, and they tried to persuade the people there to convert to Christianity. So it was political. It's so complicated for me to explain about it in one sitting. What I can learn personally, so this is very personal. My personal opinion is that God could use you and me, people, to spread the gospel, and sometimes He could use people who are not perfect for His perfect plan. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Christ in Asia. Please don't forget to leave a like. Stay tuned for the next video. Bye bye.